Hide your wives, Big Wendy is back in town. In the interest of that broken record steez I got going on, we're going to revisit one of my weirdo twin siblings born a day too late, the SG-1000, and definitely not for the last time. Sega's Dragon Wong, and it is pronounced Wong unfortunately, gave Japanese moms of the era the opportunity to say, "We have Spartan X at home." It's a game you have to make excuses for and is best experienced after a gas station, Long Island. You play as the titular Wong, a sassy boy who does a fight in an attempt to rescue his GF Kyoko, all within the restrictions of a 32 kilobyte credit card. It may seem like I'm dunking on this thing, so give me a moment to be kind. There's a reasonable logo for one thing, and I don't hate that font, I guess. You know, if they're gonna put D Wong on the health bar, you're inviting the punchlines, I don't give a shit. First things first, hit detection is piss poor, plus you move wild slow unless you jump your way through the stage. So this game did a variation on that forward roll as transportation thing before it was hip. Where this slightly gets a leg up on Kung Fu is in its exploratory element. You can scroll right and left at any time, and whenever there's a hole in the ceiling you can leap through it. Some walls are kickable, but they resemble normal, unkickable walls. You need 3 keys to get to the next stage, and somewhere after the first key you'll give up. If you happen to start cheesing your way through the game, set your guild aside and gracefully take that W. It won't be yours forever. For example, ducking and kicking repeatedly seems to work on Warp Man, but your mileage may vary. Only with true love can you become her hero? Have you tried sucking her off, dude? Does Dragon Wong escape its facile fate as a little-known sub-Sean Baby level punchline? No. Next. Exarion was developed by Jaleco and released by Taito in US arcades, and this is yet another game the SG-1000 got its mitts on first. Primarily known for 2 things, gorgeous parallax horizonscapes and a surprising amount of inertia, Exarion is another mid-80s stab at turning the Space Invaders formula into a behind-the-ship shooter. Whether it succeeds is up to your individual taste. Me, I'm into it. What kills me about Exarion is there was never a home port that did justice to the original's graphics, and now there's an Arcade Archives port that I didn't know existed till I got a Switch some months after I bought this. Sometime in the future I'd like to cover that, and the Famicom one, but we'll get there when we get there. The parallax scrolling is reasonably emulated here, but just barely. As you approach the bottom of the screen, the landscape fills your vision, and as you climb, it sinks away. The rolling perspective sort of gives the game away, however, as something that seems to be a little bit depth forward is more of a classic vertical shooter. Still, compared to a lot of its juddering brethren on the SG, this at least punches above its weight. There are 2 methods of fire, a slower, wider, one-shot-at-a-time weapon with unlimited ammo, and a thinner, rapid-fire shot with limited ammo, as shown by the charge meter on the right. Each enemy you kill increases that limited ammo meter by 1, so you can use the slower shot to build up enough ammo, at which point I like to unload obnoxiously on my enemies, that's what she said. It does seem a little backwards though, doesn't it? You'd think the shot covering more territory would be the one you're saving up, but who knows. Unfortunately, a biff like that makes sense for a company that primarily had Naughty Boy and Pop Flamer under its belt at the time. This ain't your G-MILF's Jaleco, that's for sure. After a while, the backgrounds loop, but your stage count keeps increasing. That's Exarion in a nutshell. I definitely feel like Jaleco's arcade stuff is largely overlooked, but fortunately this video dovetails into some of the other stuff I've been covering. More and more Jaleco stuff is winding up on the Switch in its original intact form. At least the arcade version's pretty. Not too long after the original dropped, a sequel came out to the MSX and the MSX only, Exarion 2. Zordy. What sucks is this is 2 years before MSX2, so it's a lateral move from the first game with just the addition of bonus stages. I'm assuming it was too knuckleheaded to push into arcades, so it was dumped off as a home release. You're not missing anything. Zippy Race, like Exarion, is an arcade game that made its way to both the SG-1000 and the NES. I can't speak for the other 2 versions at the moment, but the SG-1000 one is particularly unforgiving. Originally developed and released by Irem in 1983, with Williams releasing it here, Zippy Race, aka Motor Race USA, aka Traverse USA, aka Motor Tour, is a top-down motorcycle driving game which is most certainly not zippy. The SG-1000 version came out the same year as the arcade one, with the NES port to follow 2 years later, and finally an Arcade Archives release in 2017. The game is laid out as a rally across America, starting in Los Angeles and passing through Las Vegas, Houston, St. Louis, Chicago, and finally New York. I've heard there's a whole ending sequence once you reach the east, but I probably won't be seeing it anytime soon. This game is tough. Much like Zoom 909, this is a game that revolves around your fuel meter. You can crash as often as you want. You ostensibly have infinite lives, but each crash depletes a lot of fuel. Not only that, but your overall ranking in this rally falls lower. Fuel is scattered around as well as awkward wheelie ramps, and at least if you're playing this often, you can start to memorize the fuel locations early on. Enemies primarily consist of cars that deliberately try to sideswipe you, and you kinda have to exhaust them. They'll only dart so many feet to stop you, and then they'll give up. So you'll be working on a lot on swerving and fake-outs. This makes things dangerous, of course, because you're far too easily able to crash in the grass or other terrain on either side of the road. Not only that, but the hit detection on those death zones is particularly cheap. Along with Monaco GP and Safari Hunt, this is the other game mentioned by name in the manual for Sega's SH400 steering wheel. I can't say it pairs too well, as the wheel itself isn't hella sensitive and you'll really be twisting your arms around trying not to crash in a panic. All in all, Zippy Race is an exercise in frustration, and one that won't improve regardless of platform. It looks like the SG-1000 one sold okay though, because after its initial cartridge release, it was also released on my card. I don't have that one. Oh geez, here we go. Okay, so the arcade version of Hang On is the biggest, best, and most polished one, right? And the Master System version, which I talked a lot of shit about, came out a few years later. However, Hang On 2, and I use that title loosely, came out the same year as the arcade game. Does that make sense? No. Does that matter? Also no. How's the game? It's a lot more fun than a basement full of clicky sex nerds. For one thing, there's nothing "to" about this. At the time, Sega claimed to title this the way they did to differentiate between this and the Mark III port. This starts to reek of bullshit when you realize they didn't bother doing that to the identical MSX port. Still, I prefer it to the Mark III/Master System version, and I'll try to explain why. Hang On 2 has a unique kind of challenge. You'll be wrestling with its slight jankiness as you do your best not to crash into anyone. This is tough because everyone tries to ram you. Not quite as aggressively as they do in Zippy Race, but still enough to pose a threat. Worst of all, if you and another biker make contact, that's it. If you biff it at all on the first stage, there's no way you'll hit the finishing line in time. If you survive, however, your timer gets a little more breathing room on the following stage, so the longer you stick around, the more you're rewarded. At this point, the difficulty becomes the focus, and not the notion of bringing home an accurate version of a game you're meant to ride. The color palette is lacking, but somehow this has music where the Master System version doesn't. On a platform where the alternative is Safari Race or GP World, I'll take this any day. You can fall ass fucking backwards into a copy of that Hang On/Safari Hunt thing for the Master System, but if you put half an ounce of elbow grease into finding this one, it'll be a skosh more fun. Maybe not as pretty, but if pretty is what you're looking for, you'd be watching some other Traps bullshit right now. This showed up at a strange time in my life. I had just finished the Xbox 360 version of Doom 3's Lost Mission when I checked the mail and I got this and Darkstalker's Resurrection out of the postbox. Going between the three games was absolute whiplash, which is weirder when you realize I just beat Doom 3 again before I shot this. Allow me to coin a term, or else. The term in question sums up the sensation of a game not quite nuking it, but existing with a grand bit of heart and soul regardless. The word I'm using for this is flannel, and the SG-1000 has a shit ton of flannel. Do not ask how I determine which games do and don't have flannel, as it's probably arbitrary and exceedingly almost nearly only inside my own head. Definitely. Hang On 2 has got some flannel to it. Dragon Wong, no. Exarian could have but didn't. Starjacker, a tiny bit. Zippy Race, zilch. Zoom 909 is actually pretty decent on its own, no flannel needed. If you mash together Thexter, Route 16 Turbo, Battle City, Wrecking Crew, Goonies 1, Rollerball, Section Z, you've got yourself a Famicom Lilith Fair, motherfucker. So yeah, like I said, next is Zoom 909, which I absolutely loved. And this isn't me using SG-1000 tinted lenses. I tried an emulated ColecoVision version, and that sucks shit. Plus, this one has the weird exclusive top-down Sinistar style stage, which is tough as hell at first, but pretty satisfying once you get the hang of it. Zoom 909, developed by Sega R&D and slapped with a Buck Rogers license everywhere outside of Japan, came out in arcades in 1982 and was ported to tons of platforms, even the TI-99 over the next 2 years, until Sega brought it back home to the SG-1000. All in all, this is probably my second favorite SG-1000 game behind Monaco GP. From the outset, you're in this wannabe Death Star trench run kind of thing, but that's not all. Progression centers on killing around 30 enemies per section, at which point you're sent into another gameplay variation. Like I said during Zippy Race, this is the kind of game where you live or die on fuel consumption and you can crash or get shot as many times as you want until the tank is empty. There are walls in the first segment which are easy to see but slightly tricky to dodge on later stages, and your approach to fighting will tend to be sending a projectile to intersect with an enemy ship's trajectory, then getting out of the way before they ram you. Every 10 enemies, fuel appears, but if you're too antsy, you'll end up blasting and destroying it. The second section is more of a wide open thing, and the action ramps up accordingly. It's a lot less cramped than the first bit, however, so you shouldn't have too much trouble. Next, the SG-1000 version, and only the SG-1000 version, has this wild top-down segment. You need to get your bearings instantly since this has an asteroid-style rotate and thrust control scheme, and you're automatically flung in one direction from the start. The obstacles here are pretty obnoxious, but this tries to make up for that by giving you brief invincibility power-ups which you can string together if you're clever. It kind of feels good to fly around haphazardly, gathering fuel and slaughtering ships if you've got the controls down and you can keep yourself in a state of near-permanent invulnerability. I'm honestly pretty fond of this part, even if the learning curve starts off rough. Lastly, you fight this enemy mothership thingy, which doesn't put up too much of a fight. I suppose they intended this to be tougher, but knowing what we know about weak points now, the ones on this ship are obvious. And that's all. The game loops getting harder and harder, and it feels like a real accomplishment if you start reaching the third cycle of stages. Not gonna lie, I got good at this. One particular high score run will wind up on my Patreon eventually once I decide it exists. And now, a new feeling space game. Glorious space troops fight against invading Dester army. Avoid UFOs' continuous attacks weaving left and right, up and down. Counterattack by using your fire button. Lead the space troops to the carrier passing through the various mystery zones. Sincerely, John Sansega. Starjacker was released in US arcades through Stern, though I'm willing to bet you've never seen the machine yourself unless your day job is the kind that got you into E3 for free. The SG-1000 version came out the same year as the arcade one, and it's fine. You're tasked with piloting a hunk of spaceships northwise on a vertical shooter without much tofurkey on its bones. Slightly aping the Galaga gimmick, having multiple ships gives you more firepower with the downside of making you a larger target, while having a single ship makes evasion easier at the risk of firing less. The number of ships on screen also represents your lives. Kind of a clever mechanic, and one I'm surprised I haven't seen before, unless I have and I'm just missing the brain cells that held that memory. Most of the gameplay is somewhat unremarkable, and if it's like 3 AM, the music is either going to be real sweet or terrifying. Part of me wishes this had the depth of something released a year or two later, but considering it was released the day after I was born, I'm pretty sure I can't do anything to change that. Bosses appear in the form of some kind of Pac-Man clam thing, and upon destroying the Pac-Man clam thing, your ship goes real big, as Bjork would say, and you comically rush back to your base, where you gain another ship. Needless to say, I'm part of that generation that mispronounced Bjork, but like, did you have the internet in 1993? I feel like Starjacker gets more props than I'm doling out, but to be honest, I found myself playing Exarion more. I should probably point out that originally this and Exarion were the same episode till I bumped Starjacker here, so that's why I keep bringing up Exarion. Best game this episode was definitely Zoom 909, and while it's not full tilt the worst by any means, especially as SG-1000 joints go, the super shonky Zippy Race is at the bottom of the pile this time. If you can get Hang On 2 cheap, go right ahead, but if you have a Switch or PS4, you might as well buy Exarion from the ACA instead. The Sega SG-1000, the Silent Hill 4 of Sega consoles. I feel like I'm trying to defend a mulleted sweatpants wearing third grader whenever I proselytize about this thing, but to be fair, I was that kid, so I should probably send my therapist a link to this video. Feel free to subscribe, primarily. I mean, I'm getting a few likes, like in the single digits regardless. And I fancy a cheeky comment every once in a while. I really don't know how I was going to end this one, and it's just